Hey, I'm Morgan,
I'm Chris. Welcome to the Midlife Mud,
where we're going to bring the real shit, all the grit, and zero clue of what to do in these middle years.
Oh, and by the way, because this is all about feeling less alone, we really want to hear from you too.
Yeah, don't leave us hanging. We'd love it if you'd take a sec to visit themidlifemud.com and leave us a message.
All right, tighten those boots and let's get going.
Welcome back to the Mud.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Is it though?
2025.
Here we are, officially.
Whether we like it or not, we're going to make it happy.
I have good feelings about it overall.
Yeah.
I do. Even though I know there's some crazy stuff going on right now, like the wildfires in LA. I cannot even imagine.
Yeah. I have some friends out there and there's been some texting back and forth, and I don't even know what to say. I can't imagine being faced with something like that.
Are they safe?
Everybody that I know is safe, but so many people have been affected in such drastic ways.
And it's not over. That's the part I can't get over.
And it's not over.
Wild to me. So obviously we are thinking of everybody out there and, whatever you guys can do to donate or support. But I did want to make mention of that before we kind of, move forward today with our episode. What else is going on for your new year, your start of your year?
I'm on a journey to be more authentic and creative this year.
Oh, okay. Sounds fun.
Yeah. How about you?
I'm just trying to stay sane. We had about 5 million snow days in a row tacked onto the end of Christmas break. So today was the first day the kids all went back to school and my house was empty.
Did you cry?
It was glorious. Well, you called me this morning and you were like, you sound really chipper this morning.
For all those listening, that was my sarcasm.
Just being able to clean up the house a little bit and it stay that way for longer than 30 seconds feels really good. Anyway.
I did also just want to send out a thank you to everyone who's listening now and everybody that listened to our big kickoff on January 7th of this podcast. Yeah.
You guys, it sort of exceeded my expectations. And I really appreciate the people that reached out to us individually to just kind of give us their feedback and tell us what they thought. And I cannot encourage enough of that. That is exactly what we're trying to do, is build a community. And I would love to see more people interact with us over our website or through email or text or however it needs to be, because that just filled my heart, truly.
For sure. And I can imagine that maybe it could feel, even if you connect with the show and something that we said, a little bit awkward, leaving us a message. If you do it once or twice, it won't feel as awkward.
Well, and also we're awkward, so come be awkward with us.
100%.
Yeah, keep that coming. And we actually have some more thought-provoking requests at the end of today's episode, so stay tuned for that. But what exactly is it that we're talking about today?
I think this was your big idea.
Big idea. No, it went more like, hey, we need a topic. And I was like, shit.
How about this? So we basically thought, this is the new year and the time of goal setting and turning over the new leaf and going to the gym and doing the diet, like all of those stereotypical things.
The resolutions that die hard and fast.
So you came to me and said, well, what about doing something about dreaming versus being practical?
Yeah.
And my initial thought was, oh yeah, that's going to be no problem. Like, that'll be easy and it's very timely. But son of a biscuit, it was not that easy.
When have you and I ever made anything easy, though?
Oh my God. Why do we make it so hard?
We are diving in deep, bitches. So buckle up.
And we're prepared to admit that we're absolute idiots. I mean, that's right in our kind of hashtag or whatever, right? No clue.
This is the non-expert version of dreaming versus being practical. So let's open that up.
We had to really unpack this, you and I. And the thing that developed that was powerful when we were talking about the idea in preparation of getting our own thoughts together was this idea of a spectrum where maybe at one end of the spectrum is practical.
Yeah.
So imagine the most practical person you've ever known. And then on the other end is the dreamer.
Right.
And I believe that everybody has some aspects of both, but perhaps we live on one place in that spectrum. And I also have this belief that we slide around over the course of our life.
Mm-hmm.
We may have like kind of an organic point, but maybe when we're at one point in our life, we're more practical than we are dreamer and vice versa. Right.
So on this spectrum, where do you fall personally?
Well, I think I'm a recovering practical person.
Okay.
But I believe that I think I'm recovering from a very practical era in my life. Yeah. But I believe my baseline is probably more biased towards dreaming.
Okay. And when you say recovering, I'm curious because that's the other thing is that I want to be really careful not to paint one as better than the other.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Because I also think that either extreme doesn't get the job done. And by the job, I mean fulfilling us and giving us real, true joy.
So this is likely different for everybody, but here is my core belief that there should be some sort of a balance between the two.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that practicality is bad.
Yeah.
And by saying recovering, I could see how you might construe it that way, but quite the opposite. And I have examples, we'll go into that later, about where practicality has really served me.
Yeah.
But I feel like I got into this chunk of my life, like the last 15 years, where practicality sort of crept in and became the dominant force. And I sort of lost grip of dream.
Right.
So really what I'm trying to say is I'm trying to recover a balance between the two.
I see. Yes. I would agree. That's kind of where I feel like I am. I asked my husband, Matt, the other day about this question. I said, where do you think I fall on this spectrum? And he said, I'm probably like 60-40 dreamer, which I agree with. I think that's accurate for now. But to your point, I was not always there. And it has been a total transition from childhood to midlife. And just recently, I've started to kind of shift back towards more of a balance. What I will say is that I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but our collective assumption throughout this episode is that most people in midlife, at least that are listening to this right now, if you consider yourself in the midlife mud, we are making the assumption that you are probably more of a practical thinker. Like you lean more into that realm of the spectrum and that dreaming might feel a little bit more foreign at this point. And I think that's super important because it's really easy to look around at this time of life and be like, damn it, I wanted more. Or is this all there is, And so that's kind of what we wanted to talk about today. It's like, how do you navigate that? Right?
Just as a quick side note, I found it really fun to ask people that question. Imagine a spectrum, and which one do you think you are?
Yeah, where do you fall on it? Like what's the percentage of dreamer versus practical?
Because I did that with probably 5 people that I know pretty well. And the most interesting thing about it for me was as soon as I asked the question, I could see the gears turning like,
Never thought about that.
Let me process that.
What was the end result for most?
Like feeling more practical, but imagining themselves as more of a dreamer, which kind of supports what you just said.
Yeah, interesting. So where do we want to go with this?
Well, I think the first thing, back to kind of that evolving spectrum through an individual's life, is we wanted to talk about shifting from one to another. And one of the illustrations that I wanted to talk a minute about was kind of the shifting from dreaming to pragmatic.
Which really I would think is the standard. Like I feel like as kids, we start as dreamers.
I don't know. The creative side of me doesn't want to call anything a standard.
But I feel like that's kind of like the go. You're a dreamer and...
I'll say this. I can relate to that comment the most. And here's the other interesting thing. So creativity is something that came up a lot with me as I thought about this. And you and I talked about that, especially in correspondence with dreaming. And one of the observations I've made just in general, even this podcast, doing this show is creative.
Yeah.
In preparing some of my thoughts for this show, I turned on the music and what did I turn it to?
Oh, gosh. I don't know.
Think of a childhood artist that I really connected to.
Tears for Fears.
No, that's a good one. Tom Petty.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Right. And so
Free falling.
shifting from dreaming to pragmatic. So I picked that and I didn't really think about why, but I kind of was smiling to myself as I was listening to it because that music was very present in my life at a time where I feel like dreaming was very active still. And I just kind of felt like the world can be whatever.
Yeah.
There was much more of a blank canvas feeling to the world and a lot less constraint. And I associate that music somehow almost at an emotional level with that feeling.
I could see that. It's funny to me how music can do that.
Yes.
It's almost like how the sense of smell is so strongly tied to memory.
Yeah.
I have the same sort of feeling about music. Music can bring you back to a place, like a mental state or feeling that you were in.
Right. So here I am as a young adult, teenager, young adult, and I felt like, to use a little bit of a birth analogy, that the transition between that phase of life and being adult was pretty messy. And I don't think that's unusual, but I felt like there was a lot of conflict between this blank canvas and what I expected I needed to do in life.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's like you need to be able to make a living and you need to have some sort of a professional image, or at least this was my belief at the time. And I wanted to have a family and I wanted to have material security.
Yeah. Well, there's something about becoming a legal adult and being punched in the face with reality.
Yes.
Right?
And so for a while, and I fought it longer than some people do, and through early 20s, and mom hated this. She'd be like, you need to go to school. You need to have something.
I can't imagine why as a mom of teens myself.
Oh, no. And you know, I wanted to be a dog trainer. For a while, I was an outdoor leadership instructor. I really got into outdoor adventure, and taking kids outside and just doing things that kind of...
Which is so dreamy. Like, that's so you. Yeah.
And it really called out the creative side of me. And then I got to this intersection where I made a choice. Like, okay, I need to put that creative stuff in a box on the side. And I'm not saying I'm not going to do that, but that's going to be my side hobby. And now I need to go to school, get a profession, have a family, be responsible.
And then guess what? That takes over your entire life.
Suffocated.
Until you're like, oh, what happened?
And then that creative side just sort of slowly got quieter and quieter.
Yeah.
It was never gone. It's not gone, but
atrophied.
Yes.
I like to think of it as muscles. Like you have a dreaming muscle and a practical muscle. And that muscle, whatever you're not using, is going to atrophy.
I like that.
Doesn't mean you can't get it back, but you have to like intentionally exercise it, especially since we're in the midst of resolutions that have a lot to do with exercising for people. So was there like a specific thing that happened where you remember that shift, or it just was kind of a gradual transition?
I just remember kind of panicking and feeling like by the time I was 25 and I was still kind of not cemented in some more traditional linear trajectory, I felt like, oh no, I'm like musical chairs. I'm going to be the one left without a chair.
That like sense of urgency is so real.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I can see how you could interpret that as I'm not going to fit in. And so I'm not going to be connected. And that's really important to me.
And it sort of called me to this action of you better hurry up and grow up. That was kind of the internal voice behind the urgency.
Why are we in such a damn hurry to grow up?
Oh, fuck. I don't know.
I want to be Peter Pan.
Oh, me too.
I kind of have a similar, experience in terms of starting out very much as a dreamer and then shifting over time into more of a pragmatist. When I left to go to college, I went to college first with the intention of becoming an actress and like moving out to LA. I went to a small school in Boston to pursue this.
Like, where was that dream born? Like, where the hell was I?
Freaking clue. Where were you? I don't know. You were off playing musical chairs.
Yeah. Well, that's complicated, right? Because I was literally all over the country.
You were, which you still are. That's just the nature of you.
That's the nature of me. But I remember one day just sort of getting this message of, yeah, Morgan's going to go to Boston and be in an acting school. I'm like, what the?
Which was so wild because you're right. I was always kind of predictable in everything. I mean, that's how I am. I'm a very routine kind of person anyway. But making this decision, I was the only person that I knew out of my whole community down here that was going up to Boston to go to school. And
Right.
I knew no one. And it was like, wow, you talk about blank canvas.
I know.
It was scary, but it was so exciting and invigorating.
Yeah. Well, did I ever tell you that I really admired that about you?
No.
Yeah, 100% I did. I thought that was so cool that you would step out and make that sort of choice that was so clearly like, it wasn't just out of the ordinary for you.
Yeah.
It was sort of a rogue wave for the whole family pattern. Right?
They were like, wait, excuse me?
What are you doing?
Yeah. And honestly, at the time, for me, it felt very bold.
Yes.
But there was something in me that was like, okay, you're going to go do this big thing. And
I love how you said that.
what do you mean?
Something in you.
Yeah, it was something, I can't even tell you what, but it was a really important year and a half that I was there. Slowly over time, what started to happen was, okay, Morgan, you're going to have to pay for college. And this college was not cheap at all. And for reference, I actually had the opportunity to go to school here in Kentucky for free. So that was like looming in my head a little bit was, okay, you can pay $30,000 a year and have these loans, or you have this free education, college education waiting for you back home.
Right.
So the practical clock started ticking a little bit there.
Yeah.
And then when I met when I met Matt, when I met my husband, that's when things really started to like I just felt like, whoop, okay, now we do the things that make sense. You know what I mean? And it's not just me
Right.
at play either. And I think that's an interesting piece is, you know, once you have another person in your life that you're building a life with, it also depends on where they are on this spectrum. And you have to find a way to kind of meet in the middle, and it's really interesting. So I went from wanting to be an actress, which, by the way, I think the call for that, because one thing I believe is that dreams, like real honest to goodness dreams, come from a place of purpose within you. I think they actually tell you what your purpose is, and they connect you to your heart.
Yes.
And I think being an actress, what was appealing about that and the purpose behind that was not about being famous. In fact, that's like my worst nightmare. I do not like to be paid attention to that extent. But what it was embracing all of what it is to be a human being, like experiencing all the range of emotions and being seen as a whole human and seeing others that way. That's what that was about for me. And that still rings true today in what I think my purpose is.
Yes.
But like I said, the practicality bug started to hit. And before I know it, I'm like in dental school and I'm drilling on teeth and I'm like learning science.
Yeah.
You know? And I'm telling you what, there's no better way to atrophy your dreamer than to sit in a biology class. I mean, it is like a whole different, it's a different side of your brain, left and right brain, right? And so I got like really good at the whole left brain thing. And that was like that for a long time.
Yeah. So practicality.
Well, do we want to talk more about like what dreaming is first?
Okay, so I looked up a bunch of different definitions.
Well, and what I will say is what we're talking about when we say dreaming.
Yeah.
Right.
And the one that struck me the most, you know, given this conversation, is the ability to form novel and valuable ideas or works using one's imagination. So it's kind of back to that creativity concept.
Yeah, which is not like, oh, it's when you can draw really well or you can make a really awesome painting. Like when we say creativity, that's not what we're talking about, right?
No, I think of it more as like a mode.
Yeah, imagination mode.
Right. Yeah. And the product of the mode, which would be the painting or the song, or is less important than the mode.
Yeah. And I also think there's very little thought involved in it. When you think of the word imagination, you think of picturing things with your mind, but I see it more as it's like this feeling. It comes from a different place. It doesn't come from your head.
Yes. And I think that there is like this tug of war that goes on. At least I've experienced this, where back to your muscle analogy, I have really built up the practical muscle, right? So anytime that little voice of creativity comes in, like the seedling of a dream, the practical goes squash.
I know.
Right.
Well, and now I have this weird image of like if one arm is practicality and the other is dreaming, like we have this little limp, dangly arm and then this massive, huge bicep over on the other side. And it isn't balanced. And what are you going to get done?
Yeah, it's that tug of war thing.
And so what is the purpose then of dreaming? Because here's the thing. When I think of myself, even just a few years ago, being really on the practical side of things, if I imagine that, you who are listening is really, really in practical mode, if I say to you, oh, you should dream more, or you should connect to dreaming, I imagine you're going to slap me in the face or something. Like, what the fuck are you talking about dreaming? Like it sounds so hokey and it sounds so like la-la. Get your feet on the ground.
Yeah.
This is real life. What is the purpose of dreaming? Why is this important?
Well, here's the way I look at both of them analogously. Dreaming is like my navigation system. And practicality is the engine that drives that.
Yeah. So there's something important about knowing where you're headed. Like, what is it that you want?
That's dreaming.
Yeah.
For me.
And then practicality is the toolbox of actions, of steps that you take to get there.
Right.
And I think I want to point again to the difference between like real, honest to God, true dreams that I think come from inside you versus societal expectations of what your dream should be or what success actually is. Because I think a lot of us chase that idea of a quote dream when that's not really it.
Well, for me, like even in opening this, talking about kind of the intersection between young adult and adult for me, like the segue to getting ultra biased towards practicality was all of those expectations that were more, we could call them societal, but I think they were just kind of wired into me growing up. Like, this is what it's going to look like when you're a successful adult.
Right. Society or our culture is the one that sets out all the chairs for this musical chairs game. And then you got to play by the rules,
But the fuckery of it is that when you're at that intersection, you don't necessarily think of it that way. It's been sort of sewn into you as this is what I have to do.
Well, and you sort of own it as your own dream.
Right.
And that's what I mean is like, okay.
That's the trickery.
Yeah. So really, when we talk about dreaming, we're not talking about like what you think everybody thinks you should have.
Right.
We're talking about whatever it is that you actually want, which I understand can actually be a little bit daunting sometimes to think about. Is like, well, wait, if I could have anything, what really do I want? And why do I want that? Like, what's underneath that desire?
Right.
What's underneath that desire? What is it I'm actually looking for?
Well, it's daunting and it's distracting.
Yeah.
It can literally distract you from that deeper voice that sort of says, hey, psst, you should look at this.
Kent, are you listening?
Oh my God, I love that movie.
For anybody who's seen Real Genius, you know all about Kent.
A very young Val Kilmer.
Yes, man.
Yes. Talk about a dreamer. I think he was more on the dreamer side.
Oh, yes. And he also had this amazing brain.
Oh.
So somehow he made them work together.
I know.
And you could tell that's where that joy came from.
Yeah.
Val Kilmer and Real Genius. That's what I strive for. I love that came up. So yeah, dreaming, we get it. We understand at least, even if we may not be connected to it.
Practicality.
Where does practicality come in? It's not bad. We need it, right? So what does it serve? What purpose does it serve for us?
I use the analogy of an engine. I had to use practicality to get through professional school and build a career. Those things did not happen overnight. Everybody who's had the experience of building a career knows that. Like, it's a long slog.
And you can't live in la la land to do that.
No, you have to be focused. You have to get up. You have to keep going. Most days it doesn't feel like you're doing anything. And then arbitrarily years later, you reach some goal. And that takes a shit ton of practicality.
I think of dreaming as like this balloon floating in the clouds, right? It's sort of untethered. It's just floating around aimlessly up there. And wow, that's really amazing. But what?
Yeah.
And then practicality by itself is like being in the mud. Hello, hi, midlife. Here we are.
Struggling for it.
Yes. It's just, it's so hard because you cannot reach this balloon, right? In fact, at that point, you're not even looking at the damn balloon. You're just trying to move forward somehow.
There is, at least in in my experience with practicality, there's a lot of promise of the balloon. You're doing it for something, but the something isn't anywhere in sight.
Say more about what you mean by that.
I mean, when you wake up and you're in the middle of preparing a big presentation at work, or you're working on a big project that takes like a year to complete, and you're in the middle of that, you don't often probably wake up and feel like, this is awesome. I can just really, I feel it. And
I feel so connected to my dream.
no, you're like, this stinks. And what are we even doing? And
yeah, it's not glamorous in the moment.
No.
And that's if you're fairly balanced, right? You have the dream, you're connected to it to a degree. And I mean, people talk about you have to have your why, like remember your why, blah, blah, blah. Well, okay, to me, that means stay connected to the dream. And then when you're in the slog, as long as you're still connected to that dream, meaning you're not too far on one end of the spectrum, then you can actually make progress and you can stay motivated to keep going, even when you don't feel like you want to.
And one thing that came to me when I was thinking about practicality, it would be easy to feel like practicality is getting kind of thrown under the bus here.
Yeah.
And it's created a lot of fruit or great things in my life.
Yeah.
I mean, a career, material stability, like having food and shelter and the things that I need.
Yeah.
Opportunities to connect with others. I mean, I've got a ton of friendships that have come out of practical things that I've been doing.
Yeah.
So that's super important and super positive.
And I don't want to give practicality a bad rap because it's not even just that, practicality is nice. You have to have it. Just like you have to have dreaming. Like, I think you really have to have both if you really want to experience real joy and purpose. But given that we are operating under the assumption that most of us in midlife are kind of heavy on the practical side, how is it that you have known in the past that you are leaning way too far?
I just had another beautiful analogy, but it's back to our high adventure. That is what it's called, by the way, the Boy Scouts.
Scouts of America.
It's called the high adventure. If we had the best compass ever created and we put it on the ground, if we didn't pick it up and walk with it, it wouldn't matter.
Right. I love that.
Right. So the compass is dreaming and us walking is practicality.
It's very true. You can't do one without the other. You just cannot do it. So how do you know that you have walked off without the compass? That's my question.
You wake up one day and you feel like someone beat you over the head multiple times.
No, I would say for me, I have a real lack of presence in the moment. Like, I am so future focused and, I'm a huge planner, which is great. That has served me in a lot of ways. But sometimes I get so caught up in the planning that I forget to enjoy what it is I have planned. And I think what that is like an anxiety that sort of bubbles up in me. And one of the telltale signs for me that I am heavy into practicality mode is I have this horrible habit of picking the dry skin on my thumb, which is so attractive.
I was wondering if you were going to talk about that.
I like to call it hamburger thumb. So that is a concrete way that I can tell, I've sort of lost touch a little bit with the dreaming and I'm really, really leaning into practicality and planning and overthinking mode. Because I kind of think of them as the same. Practicality and overthinking can almost be synonymous to me if you're too far on that part of the spectrum.
Yeah.
What about you?
I go into overwhelm. And then I tend to just kind of shut down. It's kind of like a flooded engine. And there's no direction.
Yeah.
I just feel sort of like, I don't know what to do. And in fact, I love that you brought up the plan word, because I got to a point in my life where I got so stressed out by the word planning that I literally had to rename it something else. And the very interesting part of that experience is as soon as I renamed it, creativity showed up again.
Yeah, that's probably the big question in all of this is, again, not that we have any freaking clue, but if we're assuming that we're all way too on the practical side of things, how is it that we can reconnect to dreaming? Because, by the way, it's not lost. The muscle is there, but how do you exercise that? What does that look like?
Well, how do you do it?
Okay, this is going to sound totally cliche, and, you might want to punch me in the face for it, but...
Just go ahead, do it.
I do meditate, and I can't explain... I mean, I can try to explain. I actually took a course and became a meditation instructor. I never instructed anybody, but I learned in a very thorough way how to meditate, because I'm very type A, and I like to know how to do things the right way. But it is incredibly helpful. Even if I feel like I'm doing it wrong, it's incredibly helpful. I also try to make time to do the things that I sort of get lost in, whatever that might be.
Mm-hmm.
I love volunteering to take care of retired racehorses. I can totally lose track of time doing that. I love...
What is that tap for you?
How do you mean?
When you're around the horses and you're doing that, like where does it take you?
It's the connection to the animals. You know, I'm the same way with my dog. I could just lay with my dog.
I could too.
It's really silly.
I'd actually like to kidnap your dog.
Well, she woke us up in the middle of the night last night to have the runs. So you could have her for a little bit.
Got to take the good with the bad.
You do. But yeah, there's a connection with animals there.
Mm-hmm.
Music, like we talked about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
I love listening to music or playing music. I play the piano. I can lose myself completely in doing that. And it doesn't even have to be good. It's not like, oh, I need to produce something or someone needs to listen to me play or anything like that.
Yeah.
It's just something that reconnects me to a feeling in my heart, right? And more importantly, takes me out of my head. So whether it's meditation, whether it's, playing with horses, whatever it is, it takes me out of my head.
How do you know when you're connected to your heart?
I have a literal feeling in my chest.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that I would have really recognized that or been able to articulate that before the last year or two. But I've really made a point of paying attention to my body as much as I can because I am way in my head all the time. And that has gone a long way. Like if you just kind of pay attention, even for a second, oh, I have this weird feeling. What is that? Get curious.
Is there a specific moment or time or event that you can think of that helped you discover that in the past year or two?
I think having worked in coaching, with coaching clients, the coaching model that I use is very driven by that.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that because I want more of that myself.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I'm asking other people to do that, I naturally, I try to practice what I preach. Not that I'm preaching when I coach people, but, I want to walk the talk.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to do the same thing myself. What's your take on that? What do you know? What do you feel?
Like to connect with dreaming?
Yeah.
I'll follow the cliche, morning meditations, specifically morning, but even throughout the day. And
are you literally sitting on a pillow with your legs crossed and like your arms up and you're saying,
oh, hell no. No.
What does it look like for you?
I frequently do this thing that I'll just call it micro meditating. And it could be as simple as taking 2 minutes to do box breathing, which is 2 seconds in, 2 seconds hold, 2 seconds out.
Vagal nerve.
Yeah, stimulation. Yep. Just to kind of reset. In the morning time, I'll sometimes just spend some time envisioning. And I'm not super formal. I don't follow like some structured process that I learned. I did read about meditation some, but I've really developed my own kind of practice of it. And I just try to let things flow in my mind. So don't really get stuck in trying to problem solve. If I am finding myself doing that, I try to just derail that into whatever happens. I'm not attached to a certain thought or outcome when I meditate. I'm just trying to open things.
One of the best sort of analogies I heard once about meditation was like normally in your everyday life, you're in the car and you're just going down this highway, And meditation is when you get out of the car and you sit on the side of the highway and you watch the cars go by.
Yes.
Just watching each car being a thought go by. You're not getting in and going with it. It's okay that they're there.
Yes.
You're just not engaging with it. So
yeah, I love that.
I love that. Yeah.
And I think I use the river analogy. It's flowing river, chasing sunsets, back to the awe and wonder. Sunset is kind of something that elicits an image for people, but it's not just a sunset. It's anything beautiful.
What is it about awe and wonder? What does that do for you?
It just disrupts that linear, pragmatic, practical thinking. It gets me into a place where I'm like, whoa, that is just awesome.
It feels different, right?
Yes.
Like, what is that feeling?
It elicits a feeling deep in my gut of just like, wow.
Like, I think of it as this like explosion of like,
Yeah. It somehow like gets things percolating in there. and it brings out the dreaming aspects of me.
What I also think is really interesting about that is that it allows you to be more creative with what actions you might take. So all of your practical actions that your brain thought of, guess what? Your creative side has more that actually might work better.
Right.
You know what I mean? So they inform each other when you have them both working in tandem.
100%. The other thing that I have started doing is holding unstructured time, where I just kind of let thoughts and experiences come.
Yeah.
And the way that I term this when I talk about it with people is I'm dating myself. I literally spend time with myself, and sometimes it's doing an activity. I'll go for a hike. I'll go for a bike ride. My sunsets, lots of times I'll go by myself.
Yeah.
And it's just time.
And you're not listening to a podcast or listening to music.
Or trying to solve a problem.
Yeah.
No, I'm not.
You are just spending time with yourself.
And then over the past year, another thing that's been really cool for me is vision board work.
Oh, I love vision boards.
Yeah.
'Tis the season for vision boards right now.
'Tis the season. But the way that I kind of look at visions is they're visions. They're not specific.
Yeah.
And for me, that's very deliberate. And it's very empowering because I identify a goal area that I want to work in, but I'm not saying like, I have to do this.
Yeah.
And I have to meet blah, blah, blah. Right.
I want this boat and I'm going to have a Tesla.
And it's black and it's an X model and it was produced in, right.
That's not to say you can't have like very specific things that you want, but that's not the focus, is what I'm hearing you say. It's more of what's the feeling you want all of this to elicit? What is it that you're chasing? Like, what's the actual feeling you want from all of these things?
That's right. And for me, the trap of getting too specific is that then my practical mind takes over and closes me in.
It's like, it has to be this.
And it's like running me down a single path where there's actually many paths.
Yeah.
And
and some that might give you even more of what you want.
Right.
Yeah. So it's like you're cheating yourself.
Right.
I also want to reiterate the importance of the fact that no matter where we are in life and no matter what is going on, no matter our circumstances, we always have choices. And that's really easy to say. Sometimes those choices are very difficult to see, or they don't feel like choices because they're really scary, or they come at a high cost. So it's not that it's always easy to make a given choice for yourself, but I think it's really easy when we're stuck in practical mode, when we're in midlife at this stage where it feels like sort of our whole life is already determined and this is it, that we don't have a choice. And that's just not true.
And this is where the creativity can really come in and be of such a great service. But what I have found is that I have to let it. If I let the voices that say, you cannot change your career right now because you have a mortgage, run my decision making, and I don't allow the creative voice to say, well, have you considered this? I'm not saying I'm quitting my job. I'm going to keep doing my job.
Right.
But I could still be creative in my mind and heart.
Right. And there's multiple other things that might come into play where it's like, oh, I could do that. Yeah, it's not like you're saying you're letting go completely of practicality.
That's right.
You're not just totally ditching all your responsibilities and going to live in the clouds.
Like I am a parent with
college.
I've committed to that, right? I've committed to help supporting for that.
Yeah.
So that's a very, very practical thing.
It's very real and in your fucking face.
All the time, right? And I can dream, but that doesn't mean that I've given up that commitment. But both can be true.
And that commitment honors your values too.
That's right. But I think it's a great point because so often we sort of falsely put ourselves in these choices where if it's this or that, and it really doesn't have to be a lot of times.
And a whole lot of I can't because.
Yes.
Well, in reality, you actually can. It's just maybe you haven't considered all the options, or maybe you're just too afraid of choosing the other thing.
Right. The other thing is things don't happen overnight, and things don't always happen the way that we think they might.
Yeah.
And that's where just allowing the space for organic unfolding can be really powerful. But it's hard because then we don't really have control, which is actually the truth anyway. But
let's not talk about that.
Okay.
Well, and this seems like an appropriate time to, I don't You have not read The Alchemist, is that right?
That's correct.
The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho, I think is how you say it. It's a fantastic book. And one of the most famous quotes from it is, when you want something, all the universe conspires in helping you to achieve it.
I love that.
And interestingly, a lot of that has to do with you show up and you do your part, and the universe is going to make it like help you out.
Yeah.
So we're not just dreaming and sitting on our ass and waiting for all the things to come to us. We're actively engaged and sort of co-creating with the universe to make things happen for ourselves. And that's where that choice comes in. Like we always have choice in what it is that we're after.
Yes. That's such an empowering concept. And it is so easy to say it.
Oh, yeah.
And it is so hard to stop and recognize when, at least when I am putting myself in a corner because I'm failing to
acknowledge
the idea that I have choice.
Absolutely. So what's the take home? Like what's our micronutrient today?
That both dreaming and being practical are super important. And, you know, we used a few different analogies. The one that I like is the dreaming is the navigation system for me, and the practical is kind of the engine that helps take me places.
Yeah.
And we also talked about the idea of this spectrum with practicality at one side and dreaming on the other side. And that whilst many of us probably have some sort of baseline of where our personality likes to be in that spectrum, we probably also go through this evolution based on where we are in our lifetime of biasing more towards one or the other side.
I think so.
I do too. I subscribe to that.
And so you may be shifting what it is that you need to lean into more in order to attain that balance, right? So like for me right now, I'm really trying to lean more into dreaming.
Yes, I relate to that too. But perhaps if you're a dreamer, spending more time engaging in practicality, linear problem solving, what are the steps? Like the way that I think about that is...
Yeah, like think it out.
Yeah,
think it out.
I think about an engineer, right? The way an engineer classically tackles a problem. They separate it all out to all the parts and then make a plan. We talked about ways to tap into dreaming potentially. And then I put like really big and loud, create things, anything. Music, art, sensory, experiences, great food, adventure, create.
A business.
A business.
A business plan. It doesn't have to be something artsy-fartsy. A podcast.
Yeah.
Do it for the sake of creating.
Not the product, right?
Yeah.
It's about the process of creating regardless of the product. And then lastly, but probably most important for me, when a little voice whispers, follow that. Even if it's not clear, just follow it. Listen to it.
It's there for a reason. For me, it's kind of the same thing in terms of my takeaways, that dreaming is really important if we want to feel a real sense of purpose and genuine joy, not like fake what we're supposed to feel as joy, but real to the core joy in life. And that practicality is sort of the tool set that we use to bring those dreams into reality, not destroy it. Like I think of practicality as almost a hammer.
Yeah.
And you can really do a lot of damage and destruction with a hammer. But if you use it the right way, you can build some really cool stuff. So lots of little micronutrients today. I feel like this was a biggie.
Yes. Well, and it's funny, back to the beginning when we were talking about the concept for this show and just thinking, oh yeah, this is just going to be kind of a soft little Happy New Year show. And
resolution show.
What I realized is that this thing just drives into the bedrock of midlife.
Yeah, it does.
And sort of, it's relatable for everybody, but right now it seems so critical. Like there's this juncture here. Yeah. So kind of wrapping up here, in the honor of the new year and in the spirit of what we've been talking about today, we want to invite you as the listeners to share one of the following. Either one way that you plan to reconnect with dreaming in the event you've lost touch with it lately, or one practical action you plan to take this year in service of an existing dream. And what I would say is choose the one that's harder.
Yeah, choose the one that's going to take a little more work for you.
Right.
Yeah, and what we'll do, we'll keep everything anonymous, but we are going to use this to create See what we did there? We are going to create something really special with this that we are going to release on Instagram or in our episode Dirt on our website. And this is just going to be sort of a symbolic way of releasing our intention into the universe so that we can get some of that Paulo Coelho action happening of letting the universe work with us.
Paulo power.
Yeah, Paulo power. Ooh, I like it. Anyway, so there's a few different ways that you can leave us a message. Yeah. You can either go to our website, themidlifemud.com, and just at the bottom of our homepage, you can just hit a button and speak out what you want to say. You can email us at themidlifemud@gmail.com, or you can send us a text, I think, via your podcast platform. So any of those ways, we will get that information. And like I said, we're going to keep everything anonymous, but we're going to use that to create something that we sort of send out into the world.
I'm like a real dummy. What's a podcast platform?
Okay. So like if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, if you look underneath the show, I think it'll say send us a text.
Oh.
Or like on Spotify or Amazon Music or just go to our website, themidlifemud.com. But we want to hear from you. We really, really do. So please, please, please just take a second to do that. And with that, I think we're going to sign off. We'll see you next time.
In the mud. Thanks for being with us in the mud today.
If you liked this episode, do us a huge favor and subscribe to the show. This is going to make sure you never miss an episode, and it's going to help us grow our muddy community, which would mean the world to us.
See you next time in the mud.